can't feel my face. Coffee spilling all over the place. Forgot the sticks, we're turning around. Another weekend in some hockey town. With a pucked up parents, frozen toes, big hearts, bad luck. With a pucked up parents, one more tourney, one more puck. We're broke, we're loud, we love this grind. Cause our kid just scored and we lost our minds.
Greetings and welcome to Pucked Up Parents. We're at episode 25. Angela, we had 25-ounce beers last night, and I struggled to take one of those bad boys down. We were at a concert. $35 for two 25-ounce drinks. Those things are huge and got warm quick.
Yeah, no thanks. Never doing that again.
Angela, how you doing?
I'm doing okay. It's been a crazy week work-wise for me, but want to welcome everyone back to our podcast here, Pucked Up Parents. We've been pucked up hockey parents for the last 12, almost 13 years. We started out as novice first-generation hockey parents in a non-traditional hockey town. So we're pretty clueless going in, but we've learned a lot over the years, and we're still learning every day, which is why we started this podcast to share and collaborate on everything youth hockey.
We are in Kentucky, just south of Cincinnati, but we have traveled around. Both of our kids play travel hockey. So we've learned a lot over the course of the last 12 years, and we're here to share our knowledge with you and hopefully learn stuff from you as well. So like, listen, and give us a follow. Angela, as we start every episode, at least in the spring and the summer, how did hockey hit us last week? What happened in hockey for the Mauser family?
Hockey's been really quiet this week. I mean, other than the summer beer league that our oldest is playing in, that's about it.
The Big Cheese Elite won their second game, and I thought it was funny. Sam, our oldest, and his friends on the Big Cheese Elite, which is a mixture of his former teammates at Northern Kentucky and also former teammates out of Cincinnati. So a big mixture of all his buddies. And now he's bringing in high school friends who have no affiliation and no background in hockey to be the quote unquote coaches. I came home the other night before they were leaving for the game, and one of his buddies who runs track was dressed in a full suit. And I said, "Man, you got a job interview?" He goes, "Oh, no, I'm coaching Sam's team tonight." He had a full suit on, and because of the Big Cheese Elite is the name, he was rocking a Green Bay Packers cheese head for the game. I thought that was hilarious.
The boys are definitely having fun with it, and I think we talked a little bit last week about with the hockey moms about how these boys have really bonded over the years, and I think this summer beer league that they're playing in, although of course none of them are old enough to drink beer, so their summer rec league, they're having so much fun, and the boys are, bringing in, like we said, their other friends, their school friends to mingle with their hockey friends. I just think that shows how wonderful relationships have been built over the years with these kids.
Also, last week, the official Instagram official, I guess we call it, our oldest son will be playing hockey for the University of Louisville. That was announced by U of L. Whether he makes Division I, Division II for the ACHA is left to be determined, but we're real proud of him, proud to continue our journey. And Louisville is, I don't want to say it's right down the road. It's about an hour and a half away. So his hockey journey will continue. Congratulations to him. Congratulations to us. We raised a sort of collegiate level hockey player, not NCAA, but still pretty good
As
from a
close
guy
to
who
collegiate as we're gonna get out of our non-traditional hockey town.
exactly. Pretty good for two parents who had no background in hockey. Also, one other thing, Angela, hockey romantic TV shows are all the rage. There's a new Amazon Prime show that has a hockey background. I heard about it. I watched the preview. It's not gonna be for me. It's like college kids, and it's like this girl, and she wants to make a boy jealous, so she starts fake dating this other boy who happens to be a hockey player. It's on Amazon Prime. It may be up your lame alley.
Okay, it may be a check my brain at the door and, watch some cheesy TV. So, I may check that out. But let's just do a quick recap. I mentioned it a moment ago. Our last episode was an interview with a couple of my fellow hockey moms in honor of Mother's Day. I think that went really well. And for all of those fellow hockey moms out there, give us some feedback, some of your answers to some of the questions that I asked the ladies. I think maybe at some point we're going to have to make a group trip to Australia.
It sounds like you guys need to go Australian. And I will say, I do all the background. Angela produces the show, puts together the agenda and all the topics, everything that you hear lead up to the episode. I do all the follow-ups. I do all the editing, and I track how the shows are doing. And I got to say, Hockey Mom HBI episode is tracking pretty good. A lot of listens, a lot of downloads. So wow, not only should you go to Australia, you should also do another episode with the HBI. Maybe you do a remote hockey podcast from down under.
Hey, I don't know. I know we entertain ourselves, so I'm glad that we're entertaining others. So that's good to hear.
It was entertaining and a lot of good advice. I mean, I again, I didn't listen to it live. I did edit it, and it was really good. So very good. Thank you, Shauna. Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Angela, for taking the reins for a week without me. And let's get on to today's topic. What do we got on the agenda today?
We're going to talk penalties. We're going to dive back into more of the technical stuff of hockey. We've done a few interviews over the last couple of weeks, but today we thought we'd start talking about penalties. That's something we really haven't talked about in detail in an episode yet. So let's jump into that today.
Penalties. What the puck am I doing? Angela, let's talk first about, I guess, do you want to go over the types of penalties? Like, what do we see out there? I know we probably can't cover all the penalties because God knows there's weird penalties out there that I'm probably not aware of yet, despite it being 12 years into it. But what's our main ones?
Well, I think I want to first talk about offsides and icing because those are the ones that the whistle gets blown a lot. And if you're not familiar with hockey, that's where people are like, huh, what's going on? Why did they blow the whistle? Why did they stop the play? Offsides, similar to like soccer and some of the other sports out there, I believe even lacrosse and there's some other sports that have offsides. Even football has offsides. Essentially, it's when an offensive player goes into the offensive zone before the puck does. So that offensive player has crossed the blue line into the offensive zone without the puck.
Would you say, I would say, outside of looking in, when I learned the sport, it prevents cherry picking. So you're not sticking an offensive player on the scoring side and just shooting the puck all the way down to them right by the net so they can score. It makes the game better.
Right. So essentially, you see those basketball plays where you've got somebody lined up under their net where they want to score and they
And they
inbound the ball and throw it the entire length of the court. It prevents that situation in hockey. I do want to note that the younger players, it's an immediate whistle by the ref when that player, crosses into the offensive
zone.
zone without the puck. With the older group, it's a delayed offside. So if you've got a kiddo who's moving up from say U14 to U16 or U14 to high school, you're going to see what's called delayed offsides, which is essentially tagging up. If they went into the zone before the puck did, then they can skate back out over that blue line before someone touches the puck and then go back in.
Right. I love this rule. I loved when it got when we reached that age because it keeps the game flowing. You don't get that immediate whistle, the stop, the puck drop. It keeps the game going, and the kid can hustle back on the other side of the blue line and continue the play. Now, you talked about younger kids, and obviously they don't do the delayed outsides. But let's talk about the even younger kids back down to the mite area. Offsides is really not there. You're doing half ice. There really is no offsides, and that's where you see these kids doing the cherry pick. They're standing next to the net. They're not helping with the defense. They're just waiting for the puck to come down so they can score a quick goal. But as they progress on it, is it squirts? I think it's squirts when they
Squirts.
go to
Yeah, the
full ice.
10U age group where they play
And
full ice.
right, so you see those first year squirts. They're learning the offsides, a lot of whistles, a lot of stoppages because the kids are learning that I can't go over that blue line until the puck makes it across.
Right. So just want to point that one out. I mean, technically it's not a penalty, but it's a whistle. So I wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit. The other one that I want to talk about that I think confuses a lot of people who are not familiar with hockey is icing. Icing is when a player shoots the puck from kind of their defensive half of the ice into their offensive zone without the puck touching an opposing player or a teammate. Essentially, that puck crosses the center line and the goal line on their offensive zone before anyone touches it. The whistle will get blown and they'll do a face off back in your defensive zone on that one. That one's a little bit funky too, but again, that's to prevent some of that cherry picking stuff of kind of just flinging that puck down to the other end of the ice.
Also, it prevents burning of the clock, and
Yes.
it can be used strategically by coaches. So if you're getting destroyed in the defensive zone as a team, you need to make a line change. You can't do it. You're panicking. You'll hear the coach yell, ice it. If you get the puck, ice it, and they will chunk that thing down, take the penalty. That way they can get reset, get some new guys on the ice, and start all over again. So that's actually a penalty that can be utilized in a game by a coach under a strategy.
And we'll talk a little bit more about icing once we get to some of the different penalties and power plays and penalty kills and how there's some strategy with that as well. But just wanted to go ahead and introduce that term and talk about that a little bit.
Back to the mini mites again, half ice, icing doesn't
Yeah.
exist, not a thing.
Yeah.
So, all right, what else you got?
Then we get into like the real penalties. So
Now
that's
we're getting in trouble.
when,
Kids are getting in trouble.
yeah, you've done something you're not supposed to do. You did something illegal. A lot of times it's inadvertent, especially with the younger kids.
This is where, when we talk about these penalties, obviously icing and offsides, you're not going to the box. But if you talk to anybody who's not a hockey fan, doesn't know much about hockey, you say penalties, immediately they go penalty box, penalty box. So these are the ones that lead up to the penalty box. Go ahead, Angela.
Correct. Minor penalties are going to be things like tripping, hooking, boarding, high sticking, holding, lots of those things. And a minor penalty, depending on the length of the period, can be anywhere from a minute to 2 minutes. It's regulated on how long the period is. If you've got a shorter period, if you're playing 12 or 14-minute periods, you're only going to have a 1 or 1.5 minute penalty. But if you're playing a 17, 18, 20-minute period, you're going to have a 2-minute penalty. And that's
Okay,
dependent
so
on age.
I totally learned
Yeah.
something because I always saw this based on age because our youngest son in 12U, it's usually a minute 30. And I think that's what it runs. But of course, Sam, who's now 18, his at a certain age, it reads, I don't know, 14 or whatever it is, 2 minutes, a full 2 minutes.
And again, it's dependent. It's typically dependent on the length of the period. It can be different for different tournaments and whatnot because some tournaments are going to run a shorter period length or a longer period length. So you just kind of have to be aware of that. If you see a penalty that's only a minute or a minute and a half, it's probably based on how long the period is. And that's usually based on the age group of the players.
And we will get to that. But generally, of course, the 2 minute and the minute and a half, that clock we're alluding to means somebody's sitting in the box, sitting in timeout, got caught, and they're going to the sin bin to spend a little quality time with a coach or a parent. But we'll get to that.
Right. We're going to get to that, and we'll talk a little bit more about the advantage and disadvantage during a power play and a penalty kill. But you mentioned mites earlier when we were talking about the icing and offsides. Again, in mites, that half ice age group, it's usually the 8U age group. There's not really a penalty box, and usually players aren't going to be called for a penalty unless it's something really intentional. They clearly intentionally tripped another player or something along those lines. They may take that player off the ice, but they'll immediately substitute them. They're usually not playing man down.
The the true penalty box really starts at the squirt age. I know we're going to ages now. What is it, 10U or 8U? It
10U,
starts
10, yeah,
10U. Sorry.
10U.
So it really starts at 10U. Once it starts to full ice, then you start putting kids in the box.
Minor penalties are usually those unintentional tripping. Sometimes they can be intentional, but they're kind of the shorter penalties. There's also major penalties, which major penalties are going to be things like fighting or boarding, kind of just more of the malicious penalties is the way I would describe it. And those penalties are going to be longer. I think those are typically like a 5-minute penalty, and they don't expire if a goal is scored. We'll talk about that again when we get into the power play and stuff. But typically, a penalty period ends if the other team scores a goal. Then that man down or that player in the box comes out. But that is not the case with a major penalty.
With the minor and the major penalty, it's obviously during the field of play. Can you, like other sports, if you mouth off taunting or even like yell at the ref, can you get a penalty for just being an asshole?
Yeah,
Okay.
unsportsmanlike. So we'll talk about a little bit of that too. Sometimes there is what's called a double minor penalty. Say the player got a penalty for boarding and they're arguing about the boarding penalty, then they can give them an unsportsmanlike penalty as well. And so then they have a double minor. So it would be like a 2-minute penalty if you're playing longer period or whatever the minor penalty time is. You multiply that by 2, and that's what a double minor would be. And so I've seen that happen where a player gets a minor penalty for something, they argue about it, and then they get that double minor. Or they do 2 things at once. They trip somebody and then push them down or whatever. There's a million different combinations of that.
Okay, now I hear this term tossed around a lot. He got a 2 and 10. I got a 2 and 10. What the hell is 2 and 10?
2 and 10 is usually a misconduct. So they again, this can be one of the situations where they got a minor penalty, but then they escalated it in some way, shape, or form, and the ref has given them the 2-minute penalty and then a game misconduct penalty, which is a 10-minute on top of the 2. A player that gets called for a 2 and 10 is gonna sit in the penalty box, and their team is gonna play man down for 2 minutes, but then that player is going to continue to sit in the penalty box for another 10 minutes.
2 and 10. They continue to sit in the box, but they're back to full strength. We're still playing. It goes back to five. Let's say just say 5 on 5.
Right.
Now, I've seen in scenarios, it actually happened to us, I think in nationals, maybe it was nationals, where someone got a penalty and they were down a man for a good 5 or 10 minutes. What was
That's
that?
that major penalty. So
That's the
that's
major
a
penalty.
major penalty. So a 2 and 10 is gonna be you're gonna put that player in the box for 2 minutes and someone else is gonna serve that 2 minutes. And then the player that had the infraction is gonna sit for that 10 minutes, and the person who's serving the penalty is gonna be in there while the team is man down.
They would serve the man down for a full 10 minute or what I think it was 5 minutes is in the
Right. So if
nationals.
it's a major penalty, you're gonna play man down for the full 5 minutes.
Okay. All right. And then also, I know this was very hard for me to understand at first the offsetting penalties. Both kids get a penalty. And I'm like, why are we not 4 on 4? It sticks to 5 on 5.
If there's a penalty on a player from each team at the same whistle, then it's an offsetting penalty or coincidental penalty where they're both go in the box at the same time. They're both serving the same penalty minutes. Neither team has to play man down because it would be even. Why play 4 on 4 for the same exact amount of time? You just play 5 on 5 in that
But if I'm
situation.
but if I'm playing 5 on 4, say we got a guy, he's in the box. It's 5 on 4, and then a minute into that penalty, they get a penalty. So that's going to go down to 4 on 4 because it did
It's gonna go on,
simultaneously.
yeah.
Okay.
Right, because it didn't happen simultaneously. That's the issue because the first player who went in the box he's already started serving that time. When he gets out of the box, then that team is going to be on the power play versus the other team now being on the penalty kill.
God, who wrote these rules? Was there some attorney back in the olden days and also played hockey and was like, "Here's what we're gonna do." Not a misdemeanor. I want to say misdemeanor. You get misconduct. This is a major. This is a 5 on 5. This is a 4 on 4. This is a 5 versus 10. Holy cow!
Well,
Hard
I
to keep
think
up
it's
with.
I think it's interesting that a lot of times you get a situation. A lot of other sports, you have these penalty situations where, like in basketball, if there's a penalty, the other team just gets to take a foul shot.
Yeah,
And
football, you get yards.
right, you get yards, but in hockey, you actually have to play with less players. It's a very different dynamic, and it's something very different that we recently learned also happens in lacrosse.
Yeah.
But I don't really know of any other sports that play in that situation, so you're at a real disadvantage for a very specific period of time when a player commits a penalty versus in other sports, you've got other ways to kind of manage those penalties.
Yeah, you imagine baseball, like somebody gets in trouble and they're like, "All right, shortstop, you gotta sit out next inning." And then it's like
Exactly.
they're sitting or the football player, "You can't have a center for this down. He's gotta sit out
Right.
for quite a bit." Basketball,
Exactly.
or
Right, so it really changes the dynamic in the play, and we're gonna talk about this in a little bit, the different plays and the setups for whether you're in that power play, so you're playing with the full team, or a penalty kill, which is when you're playing man down.
all right, so the next thing I wanna ask about is something that a lot of non-hockey people know about is the old penalty shot. You got a penalty shot. How does that
Yeah,
work?
a penalty shot happens when a player on a breakaway or a player that is actively going to shoot or is actively shooting is fouled or a penalty is committed against them, preventing a reasonable scoring opportunity.
Is it safe to say that the stick has to be, I don't know, drawn back, cock and loaded, ready to shoot? Because I've seen plays where we don't get a penalty shot, and then I've seen others where we do get them, and I really can't tell the difference. So I'm just in my head assuming that you're making the motion of taking the shot. Think of
You
the photo with the flex of the stick. Right there, you're getting hit, and that's the penalty shot.
Yeah, I think that's the case, and I think that's one of those things that's really ambiguous, and the ref has some discretion on. They have the ref has to determine, is the player, do they really have a shot? Do they really have are they do reasonable scoring opportunity from where that player is on the ice and what they're doing at that moment.
Do they have a shot at a shot?
Yeah, do they have a shot at a shot? That makes a lot of sense.
Much like everything else in hockey makes absolute perfect sense. Okay, so what else we got on this, as we discuss penalties? The delayed penalty, which
So
kind of I kinda put that in the category with the delayed offside, so as you get older, you can the delayed penalty.
well, no, delayed penalty is gonna happen with the younger kids too, but I think because the younger kids have, less puck control, you don't have as long of a delay sometimes, and it's really dependent, but anytime there's a penalty called on the ice, unless it's something unless it's like a fight breaks out or whatever, the ref is gonna raise their arm when they see the penalty happen,
Ref
but
the ref looks
play
like
has
the ref looks like he's asking a question in class. He's like, "Yes, sir. Put your" he's putting his hand up, raising it up, like
right.
asking why is the ref asking a question? No, this is for the delayed penalty.
The ref is indicating, "I saw a penalty, and we're gonna call that penalty out when possession changes." When the team that committed the offense or committed the penalty touches the puck next, that's when the whistle blows, and the ref is gonna go over to the scorer's table and say, "Hey, number so and so committed whatever penalty," whether it was tripping or hooking or whatever.
That's when the excitement happens. The hand goes up. The, team that drew the penalty still has control of the puck. So what do you see? You see your little goalie hauling ass off that ice because now we can play possibly 6 on 5. At that time, basically a free, I don't know, what do you call it? Free, 6 on 5 for as long as we can control the puck.
Exactly. It gives your team the advantage during that delayed penalty because you pull your goalie off the ice, you put an extra skater on, you kind of have an extra shooter, extra attacker on the puck during that time. But it's really dependent on how long your team can control that puck. We've seen penalties where ref raises his arm and then suddenly the puck changes hands and a whistle within seconds. And then we've seen other times where the team who has
Right.
had that penalty against them, they manage to continue to control the puck, maybe take some shots and really kind of burn some clock, so to speak, when they have that extra player on the ice. If you see that that's what's going on, gives you a little bit of an advantage during that time. And the reason the goalie leaves the ice is because the other team, the team that committed the penalty, is not going to get a shot off because as soon as they touch the puck, the whistle is going to blow. There's no chance the other team is going to be able to get a score in that situation.
Great opportunity to see how fast your goalie can skate his ass off the ice, and it's pretty funny watching him take off. Now, let's say I'm in the delayed penalty. My team's got the puck. We're controlling the puck. The goalie, he's hauling ass off. He's off the ice. We score on that delayed penalty. Do I still get the 2 minutes after that, or is it dead? Or do you
You know,
know?
that's a good question. I don't
Ooh,
know
I
that off the
stumped a
top of
pumped
my
up
head.
parent.
Think the penalty goes away because if the player had been in the
I think so too.
box, then the player would be coming out of the box at the score unless it's a major penalty, and then
I
the
think
player would still have to serve that. So
I'm in
that
agreement. I think
makes
so
sense
too.
logically to me, but I don't know the specific rule on that, and I can't point to the USA Hockey rule on that.
You wanna know my fear on the delayed offsides with the goalie coming off? Just picture this in your head, okay? We'll use our varsity kid last season. Let's say there's a penalty, all right? Chase, our goalie, skates off the ice. Sam has the puck. He slaps it over to, I don't know, Henry, let's say Henry. Oops, Henry mishandled it. It just bounced off his, skate and went into our goal and scored. It's a that's always, like, my fear, like, some wild deflection with the other team can't touch it, obviously, because it's a dead play, but some wild deflection by us would end up that's just me, my anxiety and
I was gonna say that's
with it
your worrywart, gene that you have.
I guarantee that's probably happened in the NHL. I'll have to look that up to see if it's happened.
Yeah, that's something we'll have to look up. I don't know if that's an actual situation that's happened or not, but I think your concern over that is just your worrywart, tendencies.
Alright, so kids in the box, boom, that has a name for it, the power play.
Right.
Now your team has a
So,
power play. P
if your team is on the power play, that means that you have more players on the ice than the other team.
I always like watching the NHL when teams get, like, power plays, and it's always some they're all everything's sponsored. This power play brought to you by Trojan Condoms. Trojan Condoms will give
Jeez.
protection for your power play. When you need to stop the puck from going past the goalie, use Trojan, and the Rangers are on the power play.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's, one of the sponsors, or at least I've not heard that one.
If they aren't sponsoring it, they are missing a golden opportunity. What's better
Oh,
than
jeez.
stopping the
I
old
think that
boat
should
with
be on
with
the
a condom?
it should be sponsored by the penalty kill should be sponsored by that company,
Oh,
not the
that's true,
power play.
because you don't wanna slip one past the goalie.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I'm sorry. Alright, so power play is the people that have the are up one guy. The penalty kill is you're trying to stop that power play.
Right, when you're down a man and you're trying to kill off that time that your player is in the penalty box.
Alright, so
So,
is there a limit? Let's say, is there a limit? I've seen 5 on 3. I don't know if I've ever seen 5 on 2, so penalty upon
no,
penalty,
you can't
penalty.
do 5 on 2.
Never 5 on
It's
2.
no, never 5 on 2. You're always gonna have at least 3 players on the ice. I don't know all of the specifics behind that rule, but I do know that it's never gonna be less than 3 players on the ice. And that's the same situation. So you can have a 5 on 3 situation. When you've got that 5 on 3, obviously, you've got a two-man advantage, and that's huge, and you'll see at the end of games, if you've got a 5 on 3, you'll see a goalie pulled, and suddenly you have 6 on 3.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. It's a fix break. And also, I'll point this out again, using our nationals as an example. I think it was one of the tournament games. We went into overtime, and in overtime, the rules of overtime were 3 on 3, just to move the game quicker. And the other team had a penalty, and I was like, "Oh man, it's about to be 3 on 2. This is going to be epic. 3 on 2 on full ice." And then I see one of our kids skate out 4 on 3. And I
Yeah.
remember like Googling, I'm like, what is this? So in an overtime 3 on 3, and to your point about never have 2 players on the ice, instead of that kid sitting in the penalty box, the other team got an extra player.
Right. Well, no, the kid still sits in the penalty. The player still has to
Oh,
serve the penalty.
they just replace him
They
with
have to
someone
they
else.
replace that player with another player, but to still ensure the man advantage for the team that had the penalty committed against them, they still get the man advantage. That's why it goes to 4 on 3.
Alright, so let's talk about the penalty kill. Your kid's out there, they're down 1 player, and you're putting your best defensive players out there. What is the ultimate insult as someone on a power play, Angel? What is it? Ultimate
So
insult.
if you're on a power play and the other team, the team that's on the penalty kill, goes and scores on you, that's a like, just such a killer to the team that was on the power play, but it's such a high for the players on that penalty kill team who scored, and they call it a shorthanded goal, and I'm not gonna say it's rare because it happens,
No, it happens a lot.
but that's one of those things that's really exciting where that team that's shorthanded gets control of that puck and takes it down to the other end of the ice and scores.
I don't know if we're gonna get in this later, but when you have a power play line, I see kids playing positions they're not used to. So you have an offensive player playing that back defensive area. And in my opinion, pucked up parent, don't know crap about hockey. I think that's where these shorthanded goals happen a lot because you have these kids and playing different positions, and their whole strategy as they practice these positions in practice is to score a goal. And when that puck gets loose and there's a defensive breakdown because they're not playing the normal position they're playing in, they didn't practice for this. That's where you get these breakaways and these shorthanded goals. And to Angela's point, it happens more than you think. It happens a lot. I mean, we probably see at least
Yeah,
10 every season.
but I think the strategy is usually the power play team does put 4 shooters on the ice and 1 defenseman. You're gonna see that a lot, and I think that strategy is key because you've got the advantage because you've got an extra player on the ice, so you get 4 shooters on the ice, and but the disadvantage of that is you don't have somebody who's necessarily the greatest defensive player, and if your defensive player is having to do something else and can't hold that blue line, then that does happen, and that's where those shorthanded goals happen.
So, of course, if you score on the power play, that ends the penalty. Kid comes out of the box, sometime comes out of the box.
On a minor penalty, they do come out of the box. If it's a major penalty or one of those 2 and 10s that we talked about, that kid's gonna stay in the box for the entirety of that penalty. So on a minor penalty, the player in the box will come out. on a power play. We just talked about shorthanded goals. If you score on a shorthanded goal, you're still on the penalty kill until the end of
Yeah.
that time.
Yeah, that's true. And again, that shorthanded goal is just the ultimate insult. It's the kick in the crotch of hockey for the other team
Yeah,
on the power
man,
play.
we really screwed this one up.
All right, so let's get to are we there yet? Bring some road trips. And what's a better road trip than over to the old penalty box? Let's talk about the penalty box, Angela.
I think you referenced this earlier. You call the penalty box the sin bin. That's a frequently used term for the penalty box, as well as the box or the bin. That's where the player goes and sits in their timeout when they've done something they shouldn't have done. They broke the rules, so to speak.
Again, another thing about hockey, the uniqueness of hockey, it's the timeout, mister. You got caught, you're in trouble. Go sit in that box and think about what you did for 2 minutes. It is essentially go sit in the corner, go put your nose in the corner as a kid. It's the punishment. It's the you don't get to play for a little bit. You got to go sit in time. I mean, I keep saying timeout, not timeout in the aspects of a ball game, but timeout in the aspects of a parent telling their kid, timeout, mister. And the penalty box is varies from rink to rink. I know our barn here in Northern Kentucky, the penalty box is just, I think, another bench that sits next to the team's bench. Am I right on that?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, and we've been in at this point, we've been in probably 60, I don't know, 80 different ice rinks around the country. And some of those penalty boxes are like right next to the bench, and there's not even a partition in between them. It's just kind of the end of the bench. That's our situation. But most of the time, there is at least some sort of wall or piece of glass or something between the player bench and the penalty box. And then in some rinks, the penalty box is across the ice from the player benches.
Yeah,
And
I
I've
like
seen that most often in the kind of more professional rinks, the college rinks, things along those lines is where you see that a lot.
that thing is no man's land as far as I'm concerned because the kid's not sitting on the side of the bench with the coaches. He's kind of out there by himself. Those professional arenas, when it's a youth hockey game, they're not exactly full, and kids over there sitting by themselves. But we've seen some nice penalty boxes, and we've seen some, again, just the end of the bench penalty box.
But there's always a penalty box monitor, so somebody's always in that box with the penalized player.
And
Most of the time, it's a coach, like an assistant coach or a parent. Sometimes it's an older sibling. Sometimes there's a requirement for the penalty box monitor to have some sort of coaching or other certification through USA Hockey, whether that's a safe sport or whatever. We've seen that happen. I think that's becoming more and more common. It's not just, hey, which parent can go sit in the penalty box anymore? It's, hey, we need somebody who has some sort of, review done before they sit in the penalty box with a player.
I gotta say, I am an epic penalty box monitor, and I've talked about this before, but I come with a blanket to cover up if the kids get cold or if I get cold. I also have a book to read, so I can read the chapters from the newest Dan Brown novel. I'm sure the kids love it. Also, I enjoy doing it because I can get great pictures. You're right there on the ice. And then on those scenarios where the penalty box is next to the bench, I like to listen to the coach. You're actually hearing all the goings on of the game, all what's going on. You hear the coach yelling at them, and you get more insight to the game sitting in the penalty box. But you'll also get the stress. There's a little bit of stress aligned with it. So when a kid does get a penalty, you got to be on that door ready to open it when that time is up to get them back on the ice. And that's another thing you stress about. Is this kid going back on the ice or is he going to the bench to and it being replaced by another kid?
I wouldn't call it stress. It's more of a responsibility. You have responsibilities in the penalty box, and your
I don't want to be responsible for
responsibility
anything.
is to make sure you're opening the door at the right time when the kid's coming to the penalty box and opening the door at the right time to let them out of the penalty box.
Hang on, coach. We're about done with chapter 3 on Da Vinci Code. He's really interested to see where this goes. So we're going to go a little bit past the penalty box until we finish
Yeah.
this chapter.
See, that's what I mean. You gotta have that responsibility and know when to, open that door and pay attention to the bench so that the coach can communicate with you on, is a player going back on the ice or is the player going back on the bench? Is somebody else going out on the ice for them?
And I've seen it before, and I've done it myself on that. We talked about the penalty where well, maybe we didn't talk about this. The penalty where they are not allowed back in the game until a stoppage occurs. What determines
Right.
that? All right,
So
so say they're in the box for 2 minutes. You got a 2-minute penalty. Kids in the box, 2 minutes are up, but you're not allowed to let them out until there's a stoppage in the game. What dictates that?
There are a couple of things that dictate that. One of them, I think, is that major penalty. I think you have to stay in the box until there is a whistle. And then I think the coincidental penalties is the same things. The penalty where both players get a penalty at the same whistle, a player from either team, and they have to go sit in the box. They serve their 2 minutes until the next whistle, kind of thing.
I've done that before where I opened the box and the 2 minutes were up, and they were like, "No, you can't do that because it's
Yeah.
the next whistle." Also, I've not done this, but I've seen it where the parent or the monitor opens the box right when the 2 minutes are up, but the play is happening, like, right there, or the kid's getting a breakaway skating there right there, and it's like you see in movies where they open the car door on somebody's face, like Hangover. It's like that. It just whacks the
Yeah,
kid right
it's
in
like
the face.
mass chaos of trying to get the kid back on the ice.
And another thing about being a monitor, the different age groups, when they're squirts and they get in trouble, they get in the box, you get the eyes are welling up. They're a little upset. They're upset with themselves.
Yeah.
Sure, their parents are probably not proud of them. We'll get to that later, but they're almost on the verge of tears. As they get older and get into high school, a little more vicious, cussing. The ref is wrong. That guy's a P word, effing P word. We've heard that. As they progress to the age, they get a little more mouthy in the box.
They also get smellier.
Oh, that too.
That's one of the reasons I have no desire to work the penalty box because I don't wanna smell the kid in the penalty box.
I'll share a quick story. Sam, when I think he was a sophomore, he was a sophomore, and they were playing a game, and Sam has always been big for his size, and I was working the box, and he leveled this kid, leveled him. Kid goes down. Sam, they pull him over, put him in the box with me, and Sam's in there just going off. Hey, the restaurant, it was clean, everything else. And I'm looking at the kid on the ice, and the kid's not moving. And I go, sit your ass down. That kid's not moving. They get him off the ice. Coach comes over and he's just screaming about Sam. Throw him out. He needs to be thrown out. So after the game, I go up to the coach and again, I'm not confrontational or anything. I said, "Hey man, that was my son. I'm sorry. Is the kid okay?" He goes, "Oh yeah, he knocked him out cold and chipped his tooth. Chipped the kid's tooth."
Kid should have
Later
been
on,
wearing a mouth guard.
he should have been wearing a mouth guard. Good point. And then
Yeah.
later on, I talked to Sam, and I said, "Sam, did you say anything to him in the handshake line?" He goes, "Yeah, the kid said, 'Nice hit. You chipped my tooth.'" So everything was good. The coach was angry in the moment. Sam was very angry, but I was like, "You need to calm down because you just knocked this kid out cold." The kid was out cold. So it was getting him in the penalty box and telling him to shut up. There may be an injury on the ice.
I think that's just trying to refocus what's going on, and I do remember that because I remember I was watching that game on video, and it didn't look like a malicious hit. He must have just hit him kind of just so to make that happen, but, thankfully, that's not always the case when there's a penalty. We talked about it earlier, a lot of the penalties are inadvertent. Sometimes there's a good penalty. Sometimes if there's a breakaway before they get to that point where they're gonna be shooting, sometimes a penalty is gonna save a goal.
Yeah,
There's that situation too.
it's just like basketball. They get a breakaway, they are gonna intentionally or even like an end of a game where they're down, they're gonna intentionally foul. You're gonna do that on a breakaway, hook them, grab them,
There's gonna
keep
be
them
a
on skid.
trip or something,
Yeah.
but sometimes that trip or that hook saved a goal. You gotta think about those situations too.
All right, speaking of goals and goalies, and I know I've asked you this in the past, and I don't remember what the answer is. Let's talk about a goalie getting a penalty. A, is that a thing? And B, who serves it? Because I know the goalie ain't leaving the net or they're not putting in a substitute. What happens on a goalie?
Yes, a goalie can get a penalty. We've seen it. You just
Why?
don't
Why?
realize it.
What does a goalie do to get a penalty?
A goalie can slash, a goalie can trip, a goalie can do a lot of things. A goalie can pretty much get a penalty that any other player can get. However, if it's a minor penalty, a skater that's on the ice at the time the penalty happened has to serve it. If it's a like game misconduct penalty, the goalie gets pissed and throws somebody down and like starts wailing on them, they can get tossed from the game and that can be a goalie penalty. I've never seen that happen in youth hockey, knock on wood somewhere, but I have seen goalie penalties. And again, it's a skater that's on the ice has to serve that penalty for them. But on the stat sheet, that penalty goes to the goalie.
Okay, good to know. All right, on the same, I guess the same kind of vein, a coach. we've had coaches get thrown out of games. I think we've had coaches that get penalties and one of our kids serve it. Is that the case? So a
Yes,
coach is just being an a-hole on
that's
the
the
bench, which
case.
is typical.
Or it can be some other bench penalties. It can be the coach is arguing with the ref, and the ref can give them a bench penalty for arguing. But it can also be something like an improper substitution or delay of game. It's called a bench penalty. And a skater who's on the ice at the time of that penalty would have to serve that penalty.
Too many men, and there's a too many men on the ice too. I've seen that before.
Right. Yeah. Too many men, improper substitution, things along those lines, coach arguing with the ref. That's all kind of falls under the category of a bench penalty.
Okay, all of these penalties, the ejection. What leads to? I've seen coaches ejected. I'd see players. I guess it's the major penalties. The ejection. They throw them out.
Yeah, that's what we talked about earlier is a misconduct or a game misconduct is what they typically call that. That's some sort of an egregious penalty where someone was being incredibly malicious with the intent to hurt another player is usually when that game misconduct happens. And the player will get penalized on the score sheet, but oftentimes they get sent to the locker room when that kind of thing happens.
And for a coach, they may be thrown out of the rink. And I've always wanted, like, we had a coach thrown out once. Do you remember the Mets manager back in the '90s? He got thrown out of a baseball game, and he
And
came
he
back.
would
He put
changed
sunglasses
outfits.
and a mustache, like a fake mustache, and sat in the dugout. Ain't
Well,
that a
we referenced that last week in my talk with Shauna and Leslie, and Leslie,
Leslie got
at
thrown out
one
of a
point,
game.
she got thrown out of a game, and I was like, "Well, did you just go, like, change jackets and put on a hat and come back in?"
Those severe penalties, especially with USA Hockey, can lead to game suspensions down the road. So, like, I've seen 5-game suspensions, and then with that, you can opt for a hearing, right? Like, almost like a hearing before a board?
Right. All of these, like, these misconduct penalties get, sent to your local USA Hockey Review Board. There's essentially a disciplinary board, and you can opt for a hearing if there's some sort of misconduct, and the board says, "Okay, player that did the misconduct has, a 2-game penalty or suspension." That player can go back to the board and say, "No, I think you guys are wrong. It was called incorrectly. I want to fight this for whatever reason." They can have a hearing. I think the hearings are probably few and far between. I don't think that happens incredibly often because most of the time when the penalty happens, it's called on the ice. It's usually not in question. And there's usually a lot of video evidence of what was happening with, things like Live Barn and parents, videoing or live streaming games. There's typically a lot of video evidence. I think you and I know of one situation where a family actually went to the board and said, "We want a hearing and we want to fight this because we think the call on the ice was incorrect." And they had a lot of video evidence that the call was incorrect. There have been others where it was very blatant. It was very clear that the player committed the penalty, and there's no question that it should
They
be
pleaded guilty.
yeah, it's like, "Hey, I'm gonna plead guilty as soon as we walk in. We're not gonna go through any hearings or anything," and then they have to serve that suspension. That's
Our
all done through USA Hockey and through, the regional boards and things along those lines.
our friend roped us into hers when they got suspended. They were gonna have a hearing, and she sent us the video, and Angela and I were studying that thing like JFK movie or like the Zapruder film. Like he moved back and to the left. It looks like there was
Yeah.
a third shover on the grassy knoll in the background, and ultimately they won. They won the case. Good for them. But yeah, they can lead, and those suspensions carry over. If it's the final game of the season and you get suspended by the USA Hockey, next season, if you're on another team, but you're still registered with the USA Hockey, you're gonna have to serve that suspension.
Correct. There's also penalties or there are penalties for too many penalties.
I was curious
So
about
if
that.
Yeah, if there's a player that has I believe it's more than 4 penalties in the same game, that can lead to a suspension, and then if a team, like the single team has more than 12 penalties in a single game, that's a coach suspension.
Whoa. So,
So,
you don't even get a baker's dozen, you just get a flat dozen.
you get a
12
flat
to
dozen. If you get a dozen if your players get a dozen penalties in one game, the coach has to serve, 1 game suspension the very next game.
Alright. What a great topic. This is, insightful. I'm sure we could do more on penalties because I know there's a lot more. And just when you think you haven't seen a penalty, you see it. It's wild how many ways penalties can happen and how angry these kids can get. As a parent, Angela, I gotta ask you proud of your kids getting penalties, or you're like, "Maybe they shouldn't do that," it's just dependent on the situation, I guess?
I think it's so dependent on the situation. Like we mentioned earlier, there are a lot of inadvertent penalties. Is tripping, I think tripping, hooking, those kinds of slashing sometimes gets called inadvertently. It's just kind of within the play of the game, but it's a penalty. You trip a player, whether you meant to do it or they tripped over your stick. It's still a penalty. Then there's those penalties that we talked about where it's kind of that, intentional foul thing where that penalty saving a goal. So, I think it's really dependent on the situation. I think, you know, if your kid's keeping their cool and they've, maybe they went for a hit when our son was, you mentioned it that, sophomore year. I think it was U14 or U16. Really, they're within 1 or 2 years of checking. Are they checking properly or are they kind of doing something improperly so then it gets called as a boarding or something along those lines? It's really dependent on the situation. It's gonna happen. You're not gonna have a hockey player that plays for an entire season that doesn't get a penalty. I think that would be pretty difficult.
All right, life moves pretty fast. Reflections on penalties, Angela. What do you got?
I mean, I think it's a life lesson, life lesson of keeping your cool on the ice, in these
Cool as Ice?
situations.
That was a
Yeah,
great movie
cool as
star,
I
Vanilla Ice back in the '90s. Cool to the extreme, I reckon I'm like a vandal, like at the
Oh,
stage, watch
jeez.
something like a vandal.
No one is listening to hear you rap. Please stop. But I think it's also one of those things where you learn to serve your time of, "Hey, I made a mistake. I'm
It's
serving
like
my
legal
time."
advice from Angela
It
legal advice from
yeah,
Angela. Learn
I
to
do
serve your
work in the legal
time.
field, but yeah,
Plead
you
guilty if you have to.
right, you serve your time, but know while you're serving that penalty, your team has to work extra hard to make up for your time in the box. A lot of times these penalties aren't worth it. I think that's where kids do also learn that kind of balance between some of those intentional penalties that we mentioned and what's just a dumb penalty, you made a mistake kind of thing. Or, hey, that was a really egregious mistake. I shouldn't have whacked that kid with my stick and gotten that slashing penalty kind of thing. So it's really one of those dependent on the situation things, but I think there's a lot of life lessons to it.
You can always see early on when the kids start playing as mites and even into squirts, these I don't want to call them goons, but these kids that are kind of bully and shoving and fighting everything else, and they ultimately don't make it later on because they don't have the temperament. They get a lot of penalties. They can't handle the aggressiveness and the physicality of hockey because their temperament's not there. That's the good thing about hockey. It calms them down. This is kind of it is a punishment. It is a timeout for 2 minutes, but it is a lesson learned. And if you continue to make the penalties, as Angela said, you get thrown out of games. You get suspended. Hockey's not going to put up with goons and bullies and hot-headed players. They weed themselves out.
And you're not being a team player if you're constantly in the box, because if you're constantly in the box, your team's constantly at a disadvantage on the ice, and it makes it harder for the rest of your team. So I think it plays into that whole teamwork thing too, that if you're gonna have a penalty, know that your team is gonna start getting irritated if you keep taking a bunch of dumb penalties.
I always tell the kids when they get a penalty and our team scores a shorthand goal, I'm like, wow, that penalty actually worked. We scored a goal off
Jeez.
this stupid penalty. All right, let me ask you a question. All right. You're in charge of a rink. You're a ref. Maybe you're a ref. All right. What's the one thing you would give a parent a penalty for? You give the parents in the rink, they're sitting around you, and this parent does this, and you're like, 2 minutes in the box for doing that. What would you give a
I think
penalty for?
yelling at or arguing with the refs is eh, number 1. Like, yeah, there are gonna be bad calls, but continuing to argue with them is like it's pointless. So, I think if you continue to argue with a ref or yelling at the ref, I think that's automatic parent penalty box behavior. I'm sure you have some thoughts and opinions on that as well.
One clang of a cowbell in the box. Your child next to you is doing bottle flip in the box. Banging on the glass in the box.
That
Those
is
are my
bang
top ones.
like, to cheer, you bang on the glass, but not just banging on the glass to bang on the glass, but like, "Hey, we scored a goal, bang on the glass."
That's okay. Celebration banging on the glass is acceptable. Banging on the glass because you want your kid to skate or you're yelling at them, being an asshole sports dad in the box.
Yeah. From a non-ref perspective, I think the other one that bothers me is coaching from the stands.
Why not? You don't like the hand signals of a parent or the screaming belligerently to zone up or something is, not acceptable?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you yell skate or shoot or whatever, I don't consider that coaching from the stands. But if you're screaming at your player, "Hey, you need to be in the slot next time," or those kinds of things from the stands, that's to me, A, your player's not going to hear it, and B, are you saying the same thing that the coach is telling them, or are you just confusing your kid?
Like, big secret out there. Listen up, pucked up parents. Listen up, parents in the stands. Yell what you want to. The kids can't hear you. They cannot
E-
hear you. There's
Even if they can hear you, they're going to ignore you.
exactly, exactly. And to Angela's point, you're just screwing up the coach's plan. All right, Angela, tip of the week. What do you got for penalties?
Okay, so learn the basic rules and penalties. And at one point, I had like a screenshot of a PDF with all the hand signals that the refs make for the penalties.
Sign language at a game. That's you were actually learning signals of the ref.
So I had this little screenshot and like a tripping penalty, they kind of bend over and like swipe their hand past their leg. That's the hand signal for a tripping penalty. So I had a little screenshot of cheat sheet for those penalties. So I got to learn a lot of those. So I found that very helpful for me in the early years of our kids playing where I didn't know hockey. I didn't know the penalties and now I can at least understand do I know all of them by heart at this point? No, but the kind of more common penalties, I can now at least understand what the ref is calling, even if I can't hear the call.
Or even like the goal penalty and the no goal and all that stuff. You learned all the hand.
Right.
I
Exactly.
Is that why
Exactly.
you threw me a no goal sign in the bedroom the other night and sent me to the closet for 2 minutes?
Yeah, something like that.
Advice, my tip of the week is remember that, penalties are part of hockey development. Your kid gets a penalty, they do something dumb, they slash, they trip by accident. To Angela's point earlier, it's gonna happen. It's all part of the game. If your kid doesn't get a penalty in a year of hockey, that's just not right.
They
It's not
really playing.
yeah,
Like, are
yeah,
they really playing? Because
your
I
kid
would
must
be
be on
some
the bench.
or
Was there a
well,
goalie?
unless they're a goalie, but I we've even seen goalie penalties, and goalie penalties don't happen that often, but it's not unheard of. Because I think the refs really let the goalies get away with quite a bit. It has to be pretty egregious, but we've definitely seen it.
Would you agree? I mean, it's all part of hockey development.
Yeah,
It is, quote,
absolutely.
unquote, "getting in trouble," but it's a part of the game.
Well, I mean, it's just like a foul in basketball or you get the flag thrown in football. You're going to have penalties in sports. It's essentially not following the rules.
Right,
You didn't follow the rules, so you got to serve a penalty.
but monitor your kid. If they start to get egregious and getting a lot of penalties and becoming a goon, then now it's time to tamper it back, and your coaches should be doing something about it.
Yeah, and having a conversation about are these penalties are they inadvertent? Are they necessary? Are you taking dumb penalties? Because that we've seen that happen, especially with the older kids. I think they start getting into whatever mood or whatever and start taking dumb penalties. You got to have that conversation, and it's usually the coach having that conversation of guys, you can't take these dumb penalties. We're playing man down. We're disadvantaging ourselves.
All right. And it for penalties for this episode. Angela, take us to our outro.
I appreciate everyone listening. I know we've just scratched the surface of penalties and we've scratched the surface of a lot of the topics. We'll continue to chat about these. If you have questions, comments, or something you'd like us to cover, let us know. Leave us questions, comments on whatever platform you're listening on. We have active accounts on Facebook and Instagram. Please reach out to us there. We'd love to hear from you.
I agree. And we have merchandise tagged to the top of our page. Listen to our past interviews. Again, the HBI Hockey Mom episode was excellent. Hopefully, this one lives up to the same expectations. Look us up on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you to all our followers, all our listeners. Please continue to share with even your hockey organizations and your hockey small businesses. I don't have a hockey small business shout out today. I didn't have anything. So if you know anybody that's homemade making wax or making jerseys or anything like that, send them our way. We'll give them a little shout out. We don't ask for any money. It's just we're just trying to support the hockey community. Keep your kids out of the box as much as possible. We are here to help. And remember, keep your stick on the ice. We are all in this together. Thank you.
Up before dawn, can't feel my face. Coffee spilling all over the place. we're turning around.